Like she's just like, you know what I mean? Like that's a very terrifying thing where it's like I'm face to face with someone and they're just like,
so scary. But then,
what's her MO? Like, what's going on here? Oh, you have a huge knife and you're gonna kill me.
Yeah.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
Everybody, what's going on? It's 1 fucking hour time. I am Evan Husney. This is, of course, the show where we talk about one goddamn movie for 1 fucking hour. And we got with us to my left, Big T, Tom Fitz-G. What's going on, man? How you been? How's your week?
Wasabi. Doing good.
Keeping it real. And to my immediate right, we have, of course, as always, every week, Mr. Marcus Herring. Marcus, what's going on, man?
And as always, Marcus Herring. I love that. Thank you. Good to be here, guys.
Of course, man. Welcome back. Welcome back. And returning 1 fucking hour champion we have here, of course. Anytime we do a real dark and disturbing traumatic flick, we got this person on speed dial.
Ring.
Yep.
Yeah, it's Ring Rémy. Rémy, how's it going? Welcome to the show, Rémy Bennett, everybody.
Yes, my presence was requested by Evan, so I...
Is that how it worked?
That's how it works.
What's the chicken and the egg here? Like, so... like...
He said, we need you. We want you for this one. I was like, okay, I'm ready. Let's do it. Yeah,
cool.
that's
All
it.
right.
That's how it went.
All right.
Well, I knew you were a fan. I knew you liked this movie, and you got the 411 on the literary side, which we'll get into, and all that stuff. So I thought it was
and we did Bad Timing, and that was
That's right.
There's some cool, of course, Rogian through lines.
Yeah, and what are we talking about tonight? Of course, it is episode 73. Of course, a thematic tie-in to the year 1973 that we are covering as part of the summer series thing we're doing. And tonight's going to be 1 fucking hour on Nicolas Roeg's Don't Look Now. And this is our third Roeg film we've covered on the podcast. We've done Walkabouts in the archives. Bad Timing is in the archives, as Rémy said. And so, we're big fans of this director. He's ripe for a 1 fucking hour deep dive.
And this probably won't be the last,
No. We still got performance.
A few more.
Get to, of course.
Man Who Fell to Earth.
Oh, that's great. Jeez,
for real.
Man. Yeah, he's ripe for deep dives, that's for sure. So that'll be tonight's episode. And real quick before we kick things off, just want to give a quick shout out to the Patreon, the 1 fucking hour Patreon. It's the best way to support the show. Patreon.com/1 fucking hour, just $5 a month to subscribe. And you can get the exclusive access to the 1 fucking hour audio commentary tracks. We've been recording classic DVD style audio commentary tracks to a wide range of fucking movies. We put a poll up last week, which y'all voted on.
We love polls.
I love polls.
We do. And the flick you all chose was David Lynch's Blue Velvet. That might be up by the time that this episode is up or shortly thereafter. But so we'll have an audio commentary track, feature length to Blue Velvet.
To Blue Velvet. And I really want to thank everybody out there for voting not for Little Man. You've officially saved this podcast from itself. Yes. Because we were close to doing a full commentary on Little Man,
the Wayans Brothers.
And you saved us from ourselves, like you talked about.
Now we only have to do 1 fucking hour on it,
Yeah,
exactly.
Instead of 2 or however long.
You haven't completely escaped your Little Man fate, listeners. Yeah. But anyway, Blue Velvet, not a bad movie, right?
Not at all. That'll be great to get into. So if you want to hear that, sign up on patreon.com/1 fucking hour. Or if you like, we're also going to be doing the YouTube subscription as well too. Both of those will work. You can go to either one and you can get the commentaries that way. You can get early access to the each episode. Either way, it's the same thing. Patreon.com/1 fucking hour or subscribe to the channel through YouTube. Same damn deal. All right, guys, I think we should get right into this. Fire it up. I'm going to start up the clock here. And while I do, one thing that you said, Tom, just before I hit go on the clock, is it's kind of understood that with this show, you should have seen the movie. These are spoiler heavy hours we get into. I mean, you can make your own choice. We don't judge. If you want to watch and without seeing it, go for it. But we're going to be diving pretty, this is kind of a special movie that you may want to see, not knowing exactly everything, before you go into it. Just wanted to get that out there because it's a special
heads
flick.
up.
Yeah.
If you can, it's recommended normally, and especially with this film, because it'd just be that much more rewarding, whatever the value of this stupid podcast and, of course, the film too.
Yeah.
So just a little thought, out there.
And this might even be one of those movies where you might want to watch it like 2 or 3 times before, you get into it.
Yeah.
That is true.
So hit pause, watch the movie 3 times, and then come back to our video.
And say Candyman in the mirror 3 times.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, so here we go. We got 1 fucking hour on Don't Look Now. Here we go. And boom. All right. So here is, first, before we get into the thick of it here, just for the folks at home, here is the synopsis, a little background on the film. In what is surely the best don't movie ever made? Tom's like,
Sure.
Maybe.
Well, there's Don't Look Back.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, it depends on your
It's
preference.
one of them.
It's one of them. Nicolas Roeg's
Don't tell
Look
Mom
Now.
the babysitter.
That's right.
Sorry.
Nicolas Roeg's Don't Look Now is adapted from the 1971 short story by Daphne du Maurier. Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland portray Laura and John Baxter, a married couple who travel to Venice following the recent accidental death of their daughter Christine, after John accepts a commission to restore a church in Venice. They encounter 2 sisters, one of whom claims to be clairvoyant and informs them that their daughter is trying to contact them and warns them of danger. John at first dismisses their claims, but starts to experience mysterious sightings himself. So that's probably the simplest way to describe the movie. But it is, this sort of obtuse. I mean, we're getting into 73 here. Movies that are coming out in the multiplex are injecting a lot of these experimental techniques and new tricks learned from Europe and so on and so forth. And Tom, you were saying earlier before we started to record that this movie sort of feels like a hip take on gothic ghost stories,
Right, yeah. Just like I said, yeah, it's just kind of an interesting, odd thing. There aren't many examples of it, but to employ, I would just say generally new cinema techniques, new American cinema, like foreign film influence, Antonioni influenced filmmaking in general, so to speak. And also even like literature, and to have a film director tackle a pretty classic genre with its, all of its own tropes and, enjoyably predictable kinds of, details. It's great to see that subversion of such classic material in such a classic place, old Europe. Yeah. And to see like such experimental techniques is a really, it only makes it wilder. And that's what's great. Like and I'll shut up, but just like the example I mean is like performance is new on new. Like performance structurally as a narrative is nuts, and then it's nuts on top of nuts in telling a new nutsy story. And this is, what I mean. It's a ghost tale, but it's told like very strange 1973, hardcore style. So I love that. It's very unique, I think.
Yeah. And
I think also, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say the idea too of reinventing those genres is interesting. Reinventing the ghost tale to kind of tell that allegory, so we talked about like the theme of like trauma, for instance, like, I feel like it's a new era where we're seeing a ghost film through a different lens and in that way. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. It's also like kind of in a way it's like ghost maybe, but it's also like psychic, so you get sort of the psychic 70s, I guess, it feels more like telekinetic psychic powers than it does ghosty to me, but I don't.
Well, I just mean ghost story as a shorthand for like, classic. And then the old lady walked in, and then the howling wind came up. It's
definitely there.
Yeah.
It's the trappings, is all I'm saying. But then it's like hard experimental, like editing styles and stuff. It's so cool.
Yeah. Well, to kind of piggyback on what Marcus was saying, I in how 70s kind of the idea of psychics, clairvoyance, things like that. I guess there just was this thing. This movie, stars Donald Sutherland, and he, wanted to make the film, but he had some reservations on how the depiction of clairvoyance in the script. He felt it was handled too negatively. So at the
Donald
time,
Sutherland said that.
yeah. So at the time, he was a little open to these sort of things, and I think that was maybe a little more in the air at the time.
The film to attract any bad juju.
There you go. Yeah.
Bad energy.
Right.
Well, also Roeg,
right.
like when we talked about bad timing, there's things with Roeg where he has this bizarre, almost like cosmic touch on the work that he makes. Like there's always like bizarre coincidences and serendipitous.
Right.
It was like with Art Garfunkel and things that happen in people's real lives, mirroring things that happen in the movies. And I think that he is a bit of a magician. I think he was a bit of a magician. And then it kind of shows up in his work, and people who participate in those films always say that the experience of making the film had something kind of supernatural.
We definitely
about
sensed that and broke it down with the bad timing. There was some bad juju going on there. That's true.
Definitely.
So I guess maybe Donald was aware of like what Roeg was playing with,
Right.
Well, it's funny because it doesn't seem that negative, because it seems like the whole point of the movie is like don't ignore those instincts. Don't ignore
Absolutely.
those.
Very true.
Listen to yourself.
To sort of clarify, he thought that there could be ways for the characters to benefit from this power of ESP and not be something that they're ultimately destroyed by, which of course you could make an argument for in this movie. But
classic Sutherland, I love it.
Yeah,
and Roeg said too that the only two people he would ever cast in this was Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland. And initially they both had conflicts, right, in their schedules. And then it was like this, he said it was like a mysterious thing right as the film was coming up to shoot. Like it all worked out, and it was like this really cosmic thing where these two people were met. And he said
good timing.
Good timing. Right.
But should we go? Should we talk about the beginning of the film?
Well, no, of course. I was just going to say, I mean, as a transition into that, I think one of the characteristics of Nicolas Roeg's films that we really like, and we talk at length about in the previous episodes we've done, is obviously in the editing. The editing is very unique. It's very cutting edge of what they're doing. And most movies, most Hollywood movies especially, try to disguise their editing. The idea is to kind of not draw attention to it. It's this thing that, we're sort of hiding that part of the craft most times, leading up to this point. And but of course, with Nicolas Roeg maybe being somewhat informed by Hitchcock, who's more of that sort of purist cinema approach, and of course, which would be pushed even farther with the French New Wave. And now into the 70s, there's a much more freer experimentation that I was talking about in the mainstream. And so with his work, he's deliberately making audiences conscious of these edits and these cuts, and making it and making them deliberately more aware of how important each edit is to the actual storytelling itself.
Well, in a way, you need to change the term, from editing to montages. You know what I mean? Like the death scene at the very end when Sutherland's killed by the dwarf. There's no continuity as far as time or place whatsoever. Like you're seeing like another nation or another continent, it's daylight, another person, a person who's dead, like something that maybe didn't even happen, something in the future. And that's just really bold and wild. And that is a kind of editing, like you're saying. It's like not even the right term. It's like it's a montage, and it goes back to maybe even we're trying to think of like previous pioneers, but like even like Kenneth Anger, actually. Like it gets as fractured as like the editing logic, quote unquote, of like Invocation of My Demon Brother. It's like, okay, skull, cat, screaming face, naked person, and it's like it's not exactly like telling you story, like walking you down the street, giving you a narrative understanding. So, and that's where Roeg comes from, and he's very masterful at it, in my opinion, and he does weave it into narrative stories, which is very
and I think it's so reflective of the way that he sees the world, because he always said, when people asked him about the editing, he was like, well, life is not linear. Life is sideways. And so in the same way we talked about the idea of memory and bad timing, like the way we look at our lives, it's completely a mosaic, right? So it is a fragment. Our perception is fragmented. Our memories are fragmented. Everything is like through a glass darkly. And so he it's almost like his films are very, in a way, once you watch them a few times, they're very easy to follow because it almost mirrors the way that your brain would work once you're grasping the subconscious of the characters, So like once you're understanding that Donald Sutherland is having kind of these mosaic prophecies, when you go back and watch it, it really unfolds like you're inside this person's
like you've been to that
mind.
Landscape. You've been to that you've been to that psychological landscape.
That
so you have a little more orientation because at first you're like, where am I? Like disoriented,
Yeah,
that's true, and that's very much the case. We were talking about a lot in Bad Timing,
and it works. And it works kind of so well because he also uses these visual metaphors that are kind of helping you along the way. Like for Christ's sake, you said mosaic. What's he doing in this fucking movie? He's working on a mosaic,
Yeah.
Like
I know.
It works like that in a lot of ways. I mean, he is like giving you these not abstract visual metaphors. He's sort of letting you capture into motifs of red and motifs of breaking glass and of water and these things that you know are going to come back around again, and they're signifiers to be like to pay attention and to know that they're significant, to bring bring a lot of weighted meaning to them each time they return. So he's doing it in a way that I think is not totally abstract like a hard experimental filmmaker. He's doing it in a very accessible way. It doesn't feel like it's
a series of images, and it's his own sort of visual made up alphabet or language or whatever. And everything you're saying right now, you're talking about the components that are throughout the feature film.
Yeah,
you can see all of it in the first 7 minutes. Like they're all premiered in a cluster together, and then they all kind of explode and spray out throughout the entire film. Water, and glass,
and everything's introduced, like you said, right away. Like all the themes are introduced. The overall sort of feeling of doom and tragedy is like you're confronted with that right away in such an extreme way that it sets the tone for the rest of the movie. And the idea that you're introduced to the relationship, and then you're seeing how something so cataclysmic happens that does create a fracturing, when a child dies suddenly like that, suddenly, the relationship that you knew doesn't exist anymore. And and like we talked about earlier, like both people's perceptions of that experience are completely different. And it's so interesting because when Julie Christie's on the couch, before we see the death happen with the little girl drowning, she's going through a book, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm trying to answer a question, that our daughter was asking us." And the question was basically like, well, if the world is round, why do ponds freeze over flat? And so she was trying to look it up, and I was like looking at the book that she was like looking at, the cover, and the cover is called Beyond the Fragile Geometry of Space. Wow. Beyond the and so it's like basically great book. And then Sutherland gets up and he goes like, well, nothing is what it seems.
Nothing is what it seems.
Yeah. And so it's like right off the bat, like we're presented with
it's a short film of the whole film right there.
Yeah.
My favorite little detail on that was just in the production. I saw an interview with Roeg where he's talking about they had to, because Sutherland is delivering such a like pinnacle, like overarching line there, that it was really hard to get it. They had to do 30 takes to get it because you could see how it could go so wrong.
Wow.
As it seems. Ways to like read that wrong.
Like it could be like heavy-handed if it was like delivered in the wrong way.
And he does just toss it away.
Yeah.
In a great way.
Wow.
It's almost like a little throwaway, and you have to be
absolutely.
Like,
you have to, or else the audience is going to be like, wait.
No, I know. It's on the page. It looks so loaded.
Right.
For a film about
compare
mystery.
that to The Matrix. It's like, want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
right. Coming soon to one fucking hour. But what I was going to say, I was just going to say, just to kind of open it up, about this opening set piece we keep talking about. I mean, it is the scene in which it's the most important scene in the movie in many ways, but it also is the most important for these two characters because it's really communicating the loss of the accidental death of their daughter. And I think what makes it kind of hard to talk about in our format here is because so much is kind of laid out that's mysterious and unanswered the first time you watch it in this sequence, because there's a lot of disjointed edits. There's a lot of flash forwards. There's a lot of, sort of call and response, if you will, like in terms of the imagery. And so it's hard to talk about just what the imagery is without talking about, what happens later in the film. So it's kind of difficult to talk about one scene when you kind of have to talk about 4 at the same time because they keep getting referenced in this, opening and later on in the movie. But the first thing you see in the opening of the film is the Paramount logo, of course, duh. And then right out of that, you see the image of the pond, which of course has a ton of meaning. That's the place, obviously, where their daughter accidentally dies. But it shows that beautiful image of the rain on the pond. But of course, that's out of the chronology of the film because that's actually technically a flash forward to after the daughter has died, and that's when they're
really
because that's
I didn't catch that.
That's when they leave England to go to Venice. There's that scene which we'll talk about later, but so that's first out of chronology, that first shot. And then and we zoom into the pond. We see the title shot, the title of the movie. And then, of course, we open with the girl in the red raincoat, Christine. And then she's pushing the wheelbarrow. And then we see the brother riding the bike. and then she
smashing the glass.
That's right. Smashing the glass as it leads, of course, into, which glass does become a motif later on as kind of the warning sign of something bad shit's going to fucking happen.
Well, you know what's not unlike glass is water,
Yep,
and even frozen water.
Yeah, and then mirrors and reflections. So there's all of that stuff right off the bat.
Absolutely.
And then doubles. Then the idea of doubles comes back. So it's like you see Christine's reflection also in one of those shots where she's walking, and it's really cool. You see like that double, and then of course later on the evil dwarf is like a gruesome double of her,
grotesque version of her the kid,
right? And then the twins.
There's just one thing that there is sort of it's kind of idyllic. Like what I'll say is like at the very beginning in the house, that is sometimes I'm like, God, I want to live like that.
Oh yeah.
I want to sit in front of a roaring fire.
Yes.
And like be working on my my long-term project, restoring churches.
Yes.
And it's like the afternoon in England. Anyway, so that's kind of idyllic for a second. And I was actually thinking about Blue Velvet, the film that we're going to be doing soon, in another context.
Yeah.
Well, in this way where it's like kind of idyllic in that way, of course, it's Americana, it's white picket fence, but it's idyllic, but then it starts twisting and getting all destroyed in Blue Velvet, what I'm saying. And the equivalent for me in Blue Velvet is, or the comparison I'm saying, is the tightening and the twisting of the when he's watering the lawn and the hose is tightening and it's tensing and he's like, I guess having a stroke or something.
Yeah.
But in the film, what I'm saying is that like, the kids rides over the glass, but the bike gets a flat or something. And he's like struggling to figure out like where the flat is. So like he's not having a great time. Like something immediately is like clouding like this idyllic moment, and there's sort of this tension. And I know the tension of having a flat tire, So like, does anybody know what I mean? Like it's like
there's something going on inside, and there's something outside that's like there's a darkness that's brewing a little.
Things
bit.
are
Like
ticking up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he spills the drink on the slide.
Right. The water spills all. Yeah, and then you see the blood on the picture.
And the little boy has a cut too, right?
Right.
Like when the his sister drowns or whatever, but he's like, I cut my finger,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the idealized thing too, Tom, you're talking about, like that was so intentional because Roeg had said one of the reasons he cast the two of them as well, and with the love scene later on, is that he wanted to show like no matter how loving and pure and romantic and idealized like a couple can be at the penultimate, when you lose a child and have that kind of grief, it will tear you apart, like no matter who you are and like how perfect that union is.
It's just crushing a happy home, because it does seem like they're highly functional people who are in a loving relationship. That's true.
Absolutely.
And they're scarred. It's the whole film is about trauma. That really is the word, and it's the scarring. And we were talking about and as we maybe go through the picture now, or do you want to keep going?
No, hang on,
Evan,
because I also want to just talk about like this idea, of the glass breaking. Like that is kind of a trope to me, like when you see a psychic clairvoyant scene in any movie, you you do see like glass breaking as kind of one way of showing that in cinema. And with this scene, especially on the second rewatch, after you've seen it the first time and you go back and you watch it again, you start to notice that Donald Sutherland's character is basically, clairvoyant, and he's anticipating what is happening to his daughter. Like, you see the shot of the daughter running, and then it immediately cuts back to Donald Sutherland having an inkling that something is wrong. And you might miss that on a first watch because
he acts like he saw it out the window, but he just saw it in his head. And don't the sisters just explicitly say, one of the sisters
say that,
says to the others, like, he's got the gift.
He has the gift. Well, that's why the child was trying to talk to him. He has the gift.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
What did she say?
Right.
He's got the gift. That's it.
Oh, okay. Here you go.
Right. He doesn't seem to accept it or like realize it or something, right?
I think that's the main theme of the film.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly.
But you even
He
see
won't
him
accept
sort
it.
of like, like she's trying, Julie Christie's trying to get him to come over to like the seance or just visit with the women or something. And he's just sort of like, no. Like you can see he's sort of, he's so dismissive.
Mumbo jumbo. Yeah.
He's almost sort of like,
resistant
he's almost sort of like already, he's so experienced with psychic phenomena. It's like, well, he could rationalize how it's, that it is real, or like there's some reasoning behind it that's not really psychic powers or whatever. Because
he's just a modern person who isn't buying all this superstition. He's the dividing line between, the age of reason and superstition. And sometimes people who are so steeped in modern 20th century thinking just like doesn't even want to consider these goofy customs, and belief systems, because they're so far from science and all the things that are aiding us.
It's just
and helping
interesting
us
to have somebody that is experiencing those and still denying
Well,
it.
I think he doesn't accept
weird.
it.
That's
And
what I
so
wanted
I
to
think
talk about.
the theme is about like acceptance, because it's like as much as he's pretending he's accepting, for instance, the death of Christine, he's not truly accepting it. And Julie Christie is through that spirituality actually finds like freedom and like peace by accepting it. And so he's like part of the doom that he's facing.
He's in
is that,
denial
like,
twice.
resistance. Yeah.
Yeah. But
he's in denial of the event, and he doesn't like really let it in like she does, the child's death. But then also that he has this gift, and that's the whole friction. It's a very strange, interesting,
I was just gonna say,
like archetypal characterization.
I was just gonna say, I can't think of another time where you see a movie about a psychic who doesn't really ever realize their own ability. It's this idea.
He's dismissive of it.
He's
denying
dismissive and doesn't realize it, and is skeptical of it. And
Usually
but
it's like a secret that they're trying to keep from everybody else.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the scene in the cafe?
Yeah,
because in relation to this very thing, because when they're having when it cuts to them having that first like sort of lunch in Venice together, and there's something so interesting going on, especially when I watched it this time, where you see the two sisters for the first time right behind them at the table, and he's sort of like he clocks them in this way that like he's clocking them on this like on almost like a psychic.
She's
level.
seeing like that her husband's slightly distracted, like, and what? Hello, yeah.
And it's so funny because the opening of this short story is "Don't look now. There's two women behind us who are hypnotizing me," and so that's the opening line. That's where the title of the movie came from. So there's just something like where he can sense it, and then the woman with the blind woman who's psychic, they're having these connections, and so when you watch that whole scene play out, like I was just like, yo, pause it here, pause it. Like it's so cool because like when she goes to the bathroom. And Julie Christie's in the mirror. Another cool like moment of like all these fractured images, right? The woman is seeing all of a sudden like the pond, and while he's at the table thinking, like so, it's almost like they're sharing thoughts in a way.
Yeah, the way that it plays out specifically, because it's really interesting. So when we learn that she's blind, when it's explained by the other woman to Julie Christie that her sister is blind, we see the shot of the old woman in the three separate pieces of glass. It's a great awesome
scary
shot.
too.
Super scary, yeah, totally. And then it cuts back to Donald in that moment, and then he gets a pang because he's looking out the window and sees water. And of course, there's that visual motif. It's going to keep coming back to the water, and I'm sure
traumatized by that the specter of water. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. And so reminding him of his daughter, but then again, like this subconscious style of editing that we love with Nick Roeg, then it goes back in time to the day they left England after their daughter has died. And so they're in the car, it's raining, that's the rainwater on the pond, they're depressed, they're grieving, and then it cuts again to the pond, and then it cuts back to the clairvoyant woman. She almost kind of fades in, her eyes like fade in over the water, and then she sees the drowning, and then she knows what has happened. But it's great because it starts with sort of a vision that Donald has, and then it kind of winds up on the end with a vision the blind woman's had. Like you were saying, they're sharing this sort of vision, which is really cool.
I gotta rewatch that.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's interesting as an audience member that, like, you know, you're following it from Sutherland's perspective and just the way that the story is laid out. Like, I was skeptical that they had psychic powers, or, you know, and I was thinking like, are they out to get them? Are they con artists? Is it going to be a coven of witches? You know, whatever. You know, like you're kind of wondering.
Suspiria.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Suspiria remake.
Or like people who are gonna, or like people who are, oh God, or like people who are gonna take advantage of grieving people, you know, in some way.
Yeah.
Like I could see
because
that
they do exist.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, totally, totally.
And so it's cool that you are, as an audience, like you are constantly skeptical of like, oh, it's weird because every character has that. Where like even like the detective, there's something weird about him. The woman in the bathroom who's sitting there has this creepy look. Like every person they pass on the street who opens a window,
it's kind of
something wrong with them.
It could be a conspiracy against him, right? Because like the police is like the officer's like kind of disinterested in the case, doesn't believe him that he saw his wife. You know, he never really buys the story.
You know,
and. Yeah,
That's
right.
true.
And then the priest, the cardinal, or whatever he's dealing with, is like pretty dismissive of the whole thing. Doesn't seem too interested in like.
You all seem very European to me, in general. European attitude, like it's my day off. No,
I have a lunch.
Very European.
Yeah.
Can I bring up one thing about editing technique, Evan? Just a little insert, because again, we love his editing. Maybe I'm wrong, but I noticed that he was really getting into cross dissolves in this one. Maybe more, maybe the same, but maybe more, I think, of like bad timing and like performance. Because, you know, we talk about the hard cuts so much, and I love his hard cuts, you know, the kind of Kenneth Anger hard cuts, like the ending montage is all hard cuts when he's being murdered, you know?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of cross dissolves, like you just described, that incredible succession of cross dissolves. But just one example, there's a cross dissolve of somebody throwing something into the canal, and it splashes really hard with water, and then it cuts to like something like he's wearing a red sweater or something, and it cross dissolves rather slowly from the water that you're seeing splashing, and then it cuts to it fades to him with like a bit of red in his sweater. Does anybody remember this? And of course that looks just like, in an indirect way, the daughter submerged underwater. It was a cross dissolve. It wasn't hard cutting, and it was like I think he was really exercising the slow dissolves more in this one. And they're killing it.
Totally, it works thematically so well. I mean, you know, because obviously we're talking about visions, we're talking about things people are seeing. It helps link to those things. And of course, how there's so much visual, again, I go back to it, these motifs, these sort of things, seeds that are planted early on that are paid off all throughout the movie. But that also works for the emotional resonance of the characters too, because they're seeing, you know, traumatic patterns in everything as well too. They're seeing things that remind them of the day their daughter died. And so it works on like 40 different levels, which is
and so brilliant
awesome.
that it's in Venice. Like, I mean, it's like, you know, the girl dies in the water, and this is where you choose to go to clear your head. It's a place surrounded by water,
with
you know,
no streets but canals.
And so it's like
canals where there be streets.
It's also it also worked on like a totally bizarre, just purely like psychological, like dream, like logic level too, that like they're kind of, it's like they're trapped like within their own psyches in this labyrinth, you know, because it's also labyrinthian where they keep on getting lost.
And that's
like
Venice.
Part of the, you know, and
is,
that's it is Venice, but it's also like they're lost within their own grief. They're lost within how to come out of it, and it's surrounded by those memories.
And we don't get to see the beauty of Venice either.
Yes.
It's always overcast. We're
Off-season.
not seeing all the sights that we go to a couple churches, but they're being repaired. They're falling apart.
They're decrepit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And no, that
It feels like old
decay.
dying
It's like-
Europe.
It feels
I think
like European decay.
Yeah, and I think we talked about old dying Europe with Bad Timing. Actually.
We did.
Exactly.
Yeah, we did.
And he loved that motif. And I'll say just one other thing too about Roeg's locations are interesting to me because obviously Walkabout is a grand location for him, and he does a beautiful job with it. But then, like, what I really love is this foreigner going to like the southwestern America in a lot of Man Who Fell to Earth, and he's really killing it there. Yeah. But I do love him. I think he really flourishes in like decaying Europe. I think his soul is there, kind of.
Yeah.
It's nice to see
sure.
him into that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And the Gothic element as well. It's like there is something so it's like. There is the romance, but then there is the sort of like the decay, and that scene at the end with the fog and the
and it's in a way, if you look at it, it is the home of irrational superstition of the West. So much of it gestated in this part of the world, like Malocha,
evil eye.
whatever, like the evil eye, all this, that's what I'm saying, and so like it's unlike Arizona is all I'm saying.
Real quick, just to put a bow on that scene we were talking about the shared vision, just real quick, and then we'll move on. Is so that's the point, of course, where the clairvoyant woman is, proclaiming, "I've seen your little girl," and then of course Julie Christie's her character is like, "Holy shit!" And then it leads into another really great little touch of style where she's walking back to the cafe table, and then you just have that, like, I don't know, a high-pitched synth note that just ramps up really slow, and you're not sure why. It's kind of like that tightening of the hose you were talking about, and then all of a sudden she just collapses in slow motion.
Slow motion,
on the cafe, and it's a beautiful 70s moment, of course, because we're gonna make
really
the salad dressing look psychedelic, as it's falling
totally,
and shit. It's great. Like, it's great.
Yeah,
Sound moment. Oh yeah, sorry. That's just a great sound moment, and there are all these great little musical moments. I don't know how I feel about the score overall, but there are these great musical moments, like at the beginning with the piano. It sounds like someone learning the piano how to play, or like that theme comes through at the end. That sounds more like a sad kind of funeral, and it is a pretty melody. And the big moment at the beginning when he's holding his daughter. The music is
one of those great
there,
Donald Sutherland screams.
He's got
like
a
at
few
the end of
those.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like
he's
got that in him.
He's moaning.
Right.
He's moaning throughout this whole movie. He's like, when he's dangling on the rope.
When he's dangling about to fall. It chills me. It gets to the core.
He does.
Yeah. But again, when
Donald
she's
Sutherland plus the music, together they make a good.
Yeah,
team.
they do. They do.
No, it's a great. You brought it up. It's a great voice, and I think Roeg did pick up on that. Roeg also is killer with sound, and like there's this whole, that's one of the signifiers that it's sort of the new kind of cinema is to value sound as being another component. Of course, David Lynch took that to the bridge, and but I think Roeg is an early adopter of like, hey, guess what? Isn't half of film sound?
Yeah.
And he clearly valued it, and it's very prevalent in performance, but it's also and Walkabout, all this fucking movies, But it's beautifully done here, because he's also jumping around in time and space sonically too, somewhat,
Totally. Maybe this would be a good time just to kind of bring it up. We teased it a little bit, but just in terms of the actual themes, like, what is this movie really about, or what is all this style in service to, right? And of course, it's really the idea of, examining the concept of grief and the idea of, grief being I think Nicolas Roeg was intrigued that, by the idea of grief of making grief into the sole thrust of the film. Like that's what it's all about, and how grief can separate people. Even the closest, healthiest relationships can come undone, through the grief and the passing of of a child, something as traumatic.
Yeah, I think
as that.
specifically of a child too.
Yeah,
I feel like it's very specific to that, which is probably there's nothing worse that could happen to a human being. I think being a parent and like that, it's so funny because Stephen King was really influenced by Daphne du Maurier. Oh. And I could really sense that watching this movie because it reminded me, first of all, like a lot of The Shining, obviously. I'm sure he stole a lot of those ideas.
The psychic stuff. Yeah.
The psychic stuff and like having like
it's like
tremors.
Burnt toast.
Yeah. And having those sort of weird premonitions and how Danny will have the dreams and then he goes into like a seizure, like the woman or and then the twins, like the twins girls
totally.
So there's a lot.
And the landscape and the place itself is kind of haunted.
Yes, and you're trapped. Like he's trapped in his own psyche.
The hedge
Jack
maze.
Torrance is also in his own psyche, and they're in the maze.
Totally. Excuse me.
It does seem like Stephen King really took the psychic thing and like ran wild with it.
Yeah,
and ghost stories, So I
but
totally
even with Pet Sematary, this reminds me a lot of Pet Sematary because like the book Pet Sematary, I'm a huge fan of that book. Huge fan of that book. Like breaks my heart to such an extent. I read it many times, but it makes me cry so much because it's that feeling of like you can't go back. Like when something like that happens to you when you lose a child, and like the whole book is about a father like trying to bring his son back, but then because of that it becomes a monster. And so he's in this movie, Donald Sutherland's character is chasing the little girl who he believes somehow is his daughter. And in the short story, he's actually trying to save her because he thinks she's in trouble because she keeps on jumping over boats and stuff. And so he's actually trying to save this little girl.
And then
because he didn't save her,
too, right?
Because he didn't save her the first time,
and he has guilt about the fact that he let them play by the pond, and he has this guilt. And so, like a lot of the movie is about him like trying to right that wrong.
Second chance.
So he's chasing, and then she ends up becoming a monster that kills him. Like the lesson is like he can't let go, he can't accept. And then that's what destroys him in the end of the movie, where she is smiling at the end of the movie, even though her husband's dead. Like she's on that boat where she's like, I've accepted this, you know what I mean? Like I've accepted death. So it's interesting.
It's almost more like an allegorical story in a way, right? Than it is like that these things really happen. Like that dwarf is not the serial killer, right?
No,
like that is like the dwarf is like basically his grief destroying him or
manifested in a way.
Like a grotesque version of that grief. Like he's basically going to be a victim to that.
Hey guys, spoiler alert. We did talk, not spoiler alert at all, wrong term, but we did talk about this briefly earlier. There's another film that we love that we covered was The Brood. Yep. And The Brood, God bless Cronenberg. I think he may have seen Don't Look Now, and he does have a lot of little girls who have fucked up faces who are like running around with like plastic Macs, I think they call it, and but they represent literally. This is very Cronenberg compared to sort of the abstraction of the book and Don't Look Now, the film, but they are literal manifestations of the hostility. The rage was it the mother, right? The rage. So he played with that theme and he gets away with it. It's a great scene of like the manifestation of an extreme emotion. And I think I didn't realize till we were talking about it just now, but I think it's what we're seeing is an extreme manifestation in Don't Look Now of his guilt.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that when I was just watching.
And guilt is like the most ugly feeling, right?
Yeah. Totally.
And I caught that moment. I didn't, for whatever reason, remember it. But like when Julie Christie says to him, like, you let them play by that pond. You let that. And I'm like, fuck.
You were the one who said let the children play where they want to. You let it go near that pond.
Thanks for the memories, Laura. Thank you.
Like,
that's
damn,
hard.
And he says, thanks for the memories.
Thanks for the memories. Memories, once again, it's like, and so there's a lot of it being like he can't let go. And then like because of that, like it's like his fate is sealed. And that's what's also kind of scary about this film. It's like you want so much something else to happen,
right,
that changes his course, but like it's almost like it's
he can't move on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. He can't move on, and she's kind of searching for a new, different way to connect with her grief through the afterlife or whatever, that the clairvoyant's going to help her get to. But Rémy, you also mentioned the fact that he's, sort of like the movie shifts into this. Like in the second half, it sort of shifts into what he's telegraphing, what his foretelling through his own visions is actually becomes his own death. That's the thing that he's having visions about. I mean, he sees
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
Right. He sees his own funeral float by as the funeral barge. In
that moment is amazing.
Yeah. And
I guess
like,
you see that. You see that a couple times in the movie beforehand. Like in the second watch through, you see that the boat is in the background and a few other spots too. The funeral boat.
I love that.
So cool. Like
I love that.
It's happening.
The boat hearse.
The boat hearse. The way he's seeing the future is happening in his present, in a parallel way, which is just like so cool.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Well, can we talk about how maybe like there's also another, this is Nicolas Roeg. There's another way to also interpret this. There's another layer, let's just put it this way, of how he's a rational Western male, not to get into a gender thing necessarily, but kind of, about like how he's a rational Western modern 20th century male. He's a scientist. I would, I could say like a man of the sciences, in his profession. Sure. And he's just like, I can't even begin in my rational mind to even entertain these fanciful kind of anima, kind of female notions, traditionally speaking. And of course, the wife, the anima, the female in the relationship, is bonding with who? Two weird females, the sisters. And he is, he doesn't give it a chance. Right. But the irony is that he, as we've been saying, is as psychic as the blind sister. But and just to get back to what we were saying, where it's like he's in total denial. I think there's something about like the denial of the modern Western self in the form of the animus of male, who's like in denial of these stranger, more impossible and mysterious forces that we can't even begin to understand, unlike the very concrete things where he's like dialing in the architectural details of the details of like clearly observed rational
pieces,
measurements,
puzzle pieces.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, right?
Puzzle pieces,
and so I think that like, and of course that with the guilt, that also collapses him because he's in denial of even just meeting halfway the mysterious dark forces, and just and he's already ready to be an ambassador. It's a very strange, tragic
this is
archetype.
Like you said, like on a Rogian level, there is another literally another dimension to this, because it is like the walkabout thing that we also had talked about, like where Roeg was interested in that idea of the Aboriginal ideas, and we talked about dream time, and in dream time the idea of Aboriginal, spirituality is that nothing is linear, so death and life are not a beginning and an end. It's a cycle that weaves in and out. And so there are multiple dimensions. People die, they come back in your dreams, they're still with you. Memories are, So it's cool because I could see that, like him connecting to this material and like on a massively interesting level in that way.
Totally.
That relates to his walkabout thread. I'm saying that's so cool.
Right. And I think I think an element of that makes it more interesting is that there are all these things that are left in the film that he draws attention to that don't necessarily have significance, but like if it was all just like symbolism, you'd feel like exhausted by it. I think you'd be like, okay, I get it. But then he sprinkles in a lot of things that are maybe like the brooch, for instance.
I was gonna say
I
the
noticed
brooch.
Brooch alert.
Brooch alert. How come it always is a brooch?
He
I don't know, but
with the brooch.
No,
the brooch,
right, with the bad timing brooch. But this brooch, it was crazy when we were watching this earlier. You were like pausing it and be like, "What's up with the brooch?" And trying to figure out what's going on with the brooch. And it's
a mermaid.
Like, is it a moon? Is it a mermaid? What is that?
Well, water.
There's also something with like when the dwarf is like shaking her head or whatever. Then it cuts to the priest in bed shaking his head,
Yeah.
And it's like,
well,
it seems it's one of those things where you're like, well, that might be significant, but it might not be too. It might just be like,
love that.
something not.
The priest thing was cool too. Like
that.
that was also a little like Exorcist vibes for me too. Like the idea of questioning faith, which was also a 70s thing. That people were talking about, like, what is the idea of this conventional religious faith, and do I
which is back
accept
to the old ways and the modern ways, like I was just saying about like the two different anima and animus ways to approach things. Is so true. You're right. Like, why you do this to me, Damie, in The Exorcist? Because he's having a conflict that
exactly crisis.
I'm so glad you brought this up, Rémy, because I was going to ask you. I was going to put you to did you pause the movie and zoom in on the book title at this moment? And there's a book that Donald Sutherland is reading. Did you pause it? I did look it up because I didn't know it was like Rolf Holzhoek.
I wanted to, and I didn't have time. I was like, what is that book?
So, just a little synopsis off Wikipedia says that he was best known for his 1963 drama, The Deputy, which insinuates Pope Pius XII's indifference to Hitler's extermination of the Jews.
Whoa! Damn.
Fun read.
So there's like some
Amazon
Catholic
Prime.
indifference to life and death there, I guess.
Wow.
That's so interesting because the whole thing of religion keeps on like cropping up. Where like Donald Sutherland also doesn't find comfort in religion either.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't
because he's a thoroughly modern person. Yeah.
And the guy's not the priest also isn't offering it, right? Like he's actually has a moment where he kind of breaks down and shares with the priest, like I have some problems with my kid. And the priest is basically like, you should have started with the wife story or whatever. He's annoyed with him.
But doesn't he also say something about the fact like there's the idea that like having prophecies or having insight is also a curse. So like there's something the priest says about like, I've had prophecies, but it's not. I don't remember the words exactly.
By the way, I think, Marcus, what you were just saying, I think maybe why you see a cut to the priest waking in bed is because this is a very traumatic moment on a psychic level.
Yeah.
And he having, The Shining, it's just like, whoa, something bad's happening. There's a disturbance in the force here in Venice. I think that he's responding to like, oh my God, the American guy's being killed, by a weird dwarf.
No, you're
so
right. Disturbance in the force.
Maybe.
Totally.
I don't know.
It is.
No,
it is.
You could tell the priest is kind of clued in, like something wacky is going on.
I think that's
and
the
every
implication.
time like Donald Sutherland brings it up, like, oh, my wife like left and my son was sick, like the priest is like something is up, like
he's a deeper layer down, kind of like with the blind sister,
Is the
got The Shining.
Is the priest character in the room during the scaffolding fall? Is he underneath? He is, right?
Yeah,
I thought
he was.
Yeah, he is. So
and I think that's an omen. He's like, damn.
Well, it kind of feels like a scene out of the Omen
for
a second because it's like
that's
right. Oh my
that's
God.
really Donald, by the way.
They totally ripped that off.
That's really Donald hanging from the rope, by the way.
That's scary shit. I was wondering how they did that. I just assumed there was like a very large inflatable at the base.
I guess the stunt guy wouldn't do it for some reason, and they only had a day in the church or something. So he was like, Donald's like,
I noticed it was Donald.
Yeah,
that is a very interesting. Can we? We're running out of time. Let's
wait.
Stop.
Stop.
Oh, you got something? Oh no. Okay, we're just running out of time.
I'm the one who knocks.
I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting set
I'm the
pieces.
one who moves set pieces.
You mind once in a while? Because I know I have mostly bad ideas.
Okay, let him go.
No, because the only thing on the scaffolding, the reason I brought up the priest, I just didn't get a chance to put a bow on that. Was just the idea of what's so great about that the edit, like the style again works exactly to the scene as well, is how long he lets that little space between when we as the audience see that board falling from the roof, and then it's literally like beat 1, 2, 3, 4, crash. Like it really lets the anticipation build of when that board's going to slice through that glass. And I was wondering too, like, is that from the POV? It can't be from Donald, because if it was, then he would have snowed to do something.
Would have been a hint. Yeah,
but
move.
was it the priest? I don't know. Like, it's maybe we should go back and look. And
There's
I
a
don't
lot
know.
of forces going on here.
There's a lot of forces
That's
in
what's
there.
also interesting. That moment makes you think like
Forces.
there's forces out of anyone else's control,
Forces.
and this
Yeah.
is preordained.
Well,
That's
remember
also
when
in
the
Pet Cemetery.
the windows open up wildly, you know?
Yes, and he's like, I feel
kept missing.
cold, and the
Yeah.
windows open, and the
And he closed
Yeah.
one.
you
and
know,
goes,
yeah,
you know.
there's
Yeah.
definitely vibes going.
It's just I was going to offer like that we get into set pieces, you know, because we're running out of time, and this maybe shifts things a little bit back to maybe his pure technique, and also to like how this film was sort of revolutionary for like a Hollywood multiplex
Yeah.
kind of movie.
Yeah.
Is the sex scene, and the sex
Yeah,
scene
hell
I
yeah.
think is almost equifamous to the opening scene at this point. And
Sure.
maybe I'll just read off my bullet points, and you guys just go off. Like, it feels very real. I always felt like
Yeah.
they were actually having sex. There's a thought there.
Probably.
And then it is, I'm pretty sure this is the most graphic R-rated movie sex scene up to that time and maybe ever. And with a few cuts, it was going to be X, the film. And also when I first saw it as a child, this was completely cut out, of course. And so for many years, I had no idea of this scene. It was very confusing and very shocking. But yeah, any thoughts on the sex scene and the technique
Yeah.
employed there?
Well, I think the one thing about it that's, you know, we touched a little bit on at the top of the episode is this idea of like, you kind of have to establish with these characters that there is a strong footing or like a strong base with them. Like they really do love each other. And I think most other movies tend to, you know, overestimate the idea of having something like this because normally it's like you're just going to see the strife, you're going to see the bickering, you're going to see the arguments.
Yeah.
But the idea that these two characters really do have a foundational tenderness to them, I think is very important. And especially in terms of what they're collectively going through. So I think it's very smart, you know, on, you know, to give us this very real life like sex scene in the movie. I'm sure
very
it also
realistic.
created some big time buzz for the movie, but I think it does have a real purpose in the movie and with these characters, you know.
There's a
to have
closeness that's
Yeah.
there's an intimacy.
Intimacy.
I don't think intimacy's been rendered that way on film.
I think that's the word to describe it.
Yeah.
It's because it's
Yeah.
not lascivious. It's not. I don't think there's anything that feels like overt, like in that like kind of way. Like it does just feel intimate. It feels like a real couple having sex.
I think
You know?
the editing technique brings so much to it because it's cutting with them like getting dressed, you know, afterwards, you know, and it's otherwise it would just
Killer.
be like 5 minutes of like nude, you know, whatever. But the fact that it's like edited with all these familiar things, she's putting her socks on or whatever, and you kind of feel that that's part of the intimacy too, right?
Yeah.
Afterwards,
Brushing
and
teeth and stuff.
yeah, all that
right.
stuff. And
Yeah.
I have
domestic life.
like sex scenes can be hard for me in movies. Like it makes me a little uncomfortable, you know,
Yeah.
like I start to get like a little cringy
Yeah.
and like, you know, and I think that this one is done so well because I think the cross cutting really helps like just make it not icky, you know, and
Yeah,
not like cringy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
feel
It's
it
not
also is a-
glamorized. It's
Yeah.
not.
No.
So,
I think what Evan was saying is totally right. It's an articulation of just how close this couple is, and
It's also
we have
sort
to
of the
care.
breakthrough.
frankness.
It's
we have
also
to
sort
care
of them
about
coming
them.
back together after the child has like this is sort of like their not makeup sex, but this is them sort of like getting back to life. Mind you, this comes after that insane seance where the blind woman is like grabbing her boobs.
Oh, yeah.
Just like some sort of fertility kind of thing that's happening because it really kind of snaps Julie Christie out of it, and then you know she's able to like have this intimate moment with her partner.
It feels
do
like
wanna-
their last chance to have like a sane relationship and a sane life. You know,
Yeah.
it's like this is a glimpse of what them moving on would look like. You know?
Totally.
yeah.
Yep.
Doesn't
And she
happen.
just totally like transcends and kind of opens up, and like I think also like in the short story she's portrayed also as even more shut down in the beginning. Like he needs to take her to Venice because like the doctors are like she's not functioning, she's not getting out of this grief, and then when the switch happens with the psychics, it's like she totally just like blossoms, and she's the performance is beautiful. Like she's so like
great.
joyful and like she's like a child almost with like, the way her laughter and like
Can we
But
just
when you well,
go ahead.
well, just real quick, sorry, you mentioned the short story, and I think we just got to say shout out to Daphne du Maurier just for like in general that you know we were talking about Hitchcock being an influence in this film, but yes, how she wrote The Birds, she wrote Rebecca. You know, there's another Hitchcock
she's
movie.
amazing.
So like he must have gone into this thinking like, all right, I'm doing a fucking Hitchcock movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this short. Hitchcock already did 3 stories by this girl. So,
And the collection of short stories is really cool.
Yeah, and there's there's definitely a lot of Hitchcock in this for sure. It's definitely the sort of like next frontier of Hitchcock for sure. Real quick, just because looking at the clock, 7 minutes, I just wanted to talk about the ending scene. Just give it a little time because it's so fucking unreal. So obviously this movie kind of splinters into this crazy chase sequence here where not only you having, Julie Christie running after Donald Pleasance, who's running after who he believes is his daughter, but of course it winds up to be something much more terrifying. But that's when the movie's like, for lack of a better term, sort of genre tropes kind of start to come in for a minute, where where it goes full gothic horror. You're seeing basically the fog machine, is being used for the for the low.
It's pretty cool.
It does.
Yeah.
It really
Dracula.
like all these Dutch angles. It really looks like Mario Bava now is what we're kind of getting into, the sort of kill baby kill vibes all of a sudden in this movie, and it's cool. Or like a giallo or
Universal.
something.
It gets giallo-ish,
It does, yeah. And so that's a really cool look. And then, of course, it gets to this moment of, the big turnaround, the big reveal. It's not your daughter. It's this fucking scary-looking 4'2" person who has got a face for the ages.
Who you can't talk to this person. Like, it's like, you're not even ready for a conversation. Like, she's just like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a very terrifying thing where it's like, I'm face to face with someone and they're just like,
So scary. But then,
what's her MO? Like, what's going on here? Oh, you have a huge knife and you're going to kill me.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, right. Of course, which is amazing. And but obviously this also must have been that scene. It's very iconic, obviously the ending of this movie, but it must have made a huge impression on David Lynch too. It's hard to not think about like a Mulholland Drive.
There's definitely Lynch.
Sort of,
that's such
person.
Yep. It's
But
such
then
an
the
impactful moment,
kaleidoscopic
such a
stuff,
memorable, impactful moment. When I mentioned it to my mom,
Yeah.
we're doing this episode, she was like, "Oh my god!" She played this movie in like 30 years or something. She
Oh,
was
wow.
like, she turns around and looks, like that was the first thing she said.
The first time you see that, you're just like,
that makes an
fuck,
impact.
it's
That's
terrible.
a big jump scare.
Well, for Nick,
sure.
hey, here's a tribute to Nick Roeg. It's like he's not a horror movie maker, but he made one of the big horror movie set piece moments of all time.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
much copied, like you were saying.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And then can we, Evan, do you remember the succession of like images? I mean,
Go ahead.
I know there's so
all
many.
of them in order right now.
Yeah,
No,
I do.
But it's like, it's just amazing because it's like you go you're just like, you're
I love it.
rifling through this
For me,
kaleidoscope.
it goes longer than I thought it would in a good way. Cause I was like there's a point where most filmmakers like maybe get away with having an abstract montage, but this one is like about 5 times longer than even going very boldly into something like these kind of cross-cutting. And it just becomes, you just take a ride. It goes on for a while, longer than I would have expected. It's
That's
very
what the
does.
bold style of the movie, I think, is like you
Right.
said, letting shots run too long, letting the montage go too long. That doesn't seem to be a part of their experimentation. Is let's see how long we can
Get away
roll
with
this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. And you see like it bookends perfectly with the images from the beginning of the film. And if you've been paying extra close attention, you really know, like the themes are coming to life at that moment. The idea that this character of John is had foretold all these things. He had seen all of them. He had premonitions about all of them. And then, of course, he's bleeding out and it's gory. But then there's also this weird thing, too, where like his foot is kicking through the glass of another church, which is the church that they visited in more towards the beginning of the film. It's not the church that he's restoring. Don't get that twisted. It's a different one. And that's where they went to sort of like kneel and say something.
Light
right?
the candles?
They light a candle, right? And then, Rémy, you pointed out that you see one candle blow out in this moment that kind of is a nice
Yeah,
little...
I'm like, he's dead.
Like,
Yeah.
that's
the
him.
church that his feet are kicking into. That's
Yes.
like when we see. Oh wow.
Yes.
And then when they're
yes.
driving by in the barge, when the funeral barge earlier, Julie Christie says like, I want to stop at that church.
Yeah.
And then he's like, why that church? And she's like, I don't know. I want to light the candle. And then like,
Yeah.
and then at the
Yeah,
very end, that ends up being the church that Julie Christie and the twins go up to on the
For his funeral.
for his
Right.
funeral.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
So
one
it is
kinda-
all this like weird cyclical kind of.
It is, yeah. And one thing that's interesting that Roeg has said about the movie, about the end of the movie, is obviously after Donald Pleasance dies, there is the funeral barge, as we've saw kind of forecasted earlier in the film, but we're seeing it now for real this time play out. And he's commented on that she almost delivers this kind of like, I want to say like she kind of smiles at the end of the film.
It's a bit of a smile.
It's a smile, and he sort of said that he's, Nick Roeg has encouraged the interpretation of that smile to not just that she feels that Christine and John are, like united again in another world, but also that she's pregnant. Is the kind of like other thing that he's put out there. Yeah, is that it's a
single mom smile. That's
the
single mom.
You know that smile.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, but that is very intriguing.
That is interesting.
Well, she's anima, she's life, she's still literally alive, and I think to me it looked like a smile born of like kind of like a almost like a psychic level, like wisdom, like he went through a thing, he didn't make it, but I've gone through a lot of stuff, and I'm moving forward now.
She transcended all that.
Transcended, exactly.
Yeah, and it's almost like a beatific moment, like and they represent like those two. Also, the psychic woman says Milton. Another weird point. He said John Milton loved Venice, and it's like Paradise Lost, and it's like heaven and hell. And she's kind of in heaven, and he went to hell.
Is in hell.
Wow.
Is hell.
He is hell. That's all. Yeah.
One thing we didn't really touch on in the hour here, as we're looking at the last minute here, is this idea that there's this kind of like MacGuffin-y, Hitchcock MacGuffin concept of like a serial killer that's also on the loose in Venice, and we are seeing other bodies that are being pulled out of water.
I love that.
Like from Frenzy.
Yeah, totally,
cool.
like Frenzy vibes, and it's and that's also not only just a weird thematic connection to the water, because it's a nice call and response to that as well too, of pulling his daughter out of the pond.
Death in the
water.
water.
It's just death in the water, but it's just another element to this that just adds like just that keeps the dread alive, I guess. And where is this going?
Trapped in hell.
Absolutely.
It's totally terrifying. And they can hear like
drown.
screams throughout.
What's the dead soul of Europe? If I was her, I'd have the kid and move to California and get the hell out of dead Europe.
I gotta say something real quick. Donald Sutherland, he's wearing a wig in this movie.
No.
The fuck?
Knows.
All right.
Give me the Sutherland.
Oh my God. We need some Southern.
I love their
ones,
curly hair. Are they both wearing wigs? Can I get the Harpo?
Why? Why is he wearing a wig? You know?
I don't know.
It wasn't necessary.
Are you sure? That's so nuts. Really?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, that was one fucking hour on Don't Look
Great movie.
Now.
Oh, great movie. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
great pick. Hey, we forgot to mention that this was a pick voted by you, our viewers.
Right.
Of course, you had 4 flicks to choose between, and you chose this one. Don't Look Now is a monster, and I'm not surprised it won.
Yeah.
And
I get it.
I'm glad we did it.
Good call, everybody.
Lot to
Yeah,
talk
But
about.
that Altman is becoming a Moby Dick for us. Like
It is.
we've never done an Altman, and we're still not doing
Wow.
Altmans.
Holy
with this,
shit.
all
Well,
these
maybe we can-
polls.
I love polls.
Maybe we can right that wrong right now. Let's get into it. So here's how this works. Obviously, this whole summer, we're doing this new gimmick on the show here where the episode number of the show is corresponding with a particular year. So, of course, tonight was episode 73. We did Don't Look Now from 1973, and you voted on the movie from 73 that we did. So now, next week will be 1974. So there's going to be 4 new films for you to pick from. Whatever you guys pick, whatever wins the poll, we're going to be doing. And how to vote, I'm sure you know this already, but you can go to our Instagram account profile at @OneFuckingHour on Instagram. Click the stories, and if you're watching this within the first 24 hours of this episode airing, you'll be able to participate in the poll. So get up there now and do that, because as you're listening to this, it's going on. So here's the 4 flicks from 1974. I'll pick it right up. Robert Altman. Let's try to get it in. So Robert Altman's got a flick from 1974, and it happens to be a movie that we love quite a bit here at One Fucking Hour and have really thought about doing many times before in the past, and maybe now it'll be here. But it's probably, God, my number 2 favorite Altman flick, maybe 3, 2, 3.
Yeah,
I
it's up
absolutely
there.
love it.
Me.
California Split, of course, starring Elliot Gould, George Segal, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely fucking Tom.
Oh,
tell us.
I'm just into any movie where a bunch of knuckleheads stay up all night drinking, and they just sleep. They just stay up through the night and it's breakfast and still be drunk.
I love
and,
it.
and somebody has to go to work even, and they're like, "Oh, have fun," and they're like eating cereal and stuff. That's why I like that film. It's not about gambling to me.
No, totally.
It's
but
about like just fucked up people like on the smallest rung, lowest rung.
Drunk, eating breakfast
And
in people's houses.
Yeah.
Yes, and like any good gambling addict film, it also has those moments of where the characters don't realize when to walk away, and it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch.
Yeah.
That's some of the hardest to watch shit in film.
We love screaming at them, "Walk away!"
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
You get a
This
thrill
is your number 2, Evan. Your number 1's definitely Popeye.
that's right. No, number 1 is Three Women. Look out when we get to 78 or whatever
shit.
it is.
1977. Here we come.
77. Yeah, here we go. So
Altmania.
We should do an Altmania.
Nice.
None of these win. We'll do an
should.
Altmania later on.
We shall.
So, option number 1, California Split, will be next week, or will it be another Elliot Gould starring performance?
Yeah, baby.
Because, I mean, look,
1970 Elliot Gould.
yeah, because he really is one of the faces of early 70s, or at least the 70s. in general.
face.
Yeah.
He's the dude face of the early 70s. Yeah.
Yes, totally. And he's in so many great movies of this era. It's one after the other. But this happens to be a little bit more on the deeper cut side for y'all. So I'm hoping that you might be familiar with it, because if you haven't seen it, I'm going to put the thumb on the scale a little bit for this one because it's a little deeper cut, but it's a great fucking movie, and it's got some incredible filmmaking and set pieces. It's a 70s buddy cop flick, and it is Busting is the name of the film, starring Elliot Gould and Robert Blake. It is this amazing high-octane 70s buddy cop action flick.
Buddy cop.
It's like gross LA underbelly, like perfection.
Yeah.
It's like really gnarly, ugly LA. Somebody knows LA, like whoever did the locations or something. It's
Totally.
just so much that. But it was great to hear that you guys were all big fans of Busting, because I grew up with it and I was just obsessed with the soundtrack, every set piece, the very end of the film, and of course lots of hard 2 scoops of Gould, just with Gould on top and Gould on the side.
Gould. Yeah.
Right,
It
Gould on
is.
Gould crime. It's so much fun. Peter Yates, right?
Yeah, it is a gem. I don't think it's Peter Yates, is it?
Oh, what am
Get
I
out of
thinking?
here.
Forget it.
I don't
Never
think
mind.
so.
I don't know. Somebody directed it.
Someone did direct it. Is it? Oh fuck! Now I gotta
Someone
look
did
it
direct.
up. I'm gonna cut it. It's Peter. It's Peter Hyams who did it. Of course,
Hyams, right? Okay.
You know, the wonderful director of Outland and Time Cop and End of Days. It's that guy. Okay,
Oh, wow.
so
everybody's favorite.
everyone's
The
favorite.
tip of everyone's tongue.
Yeah.
No, but it's really a gem, and we would obviously tear it up. I mean, everybody was bringing up. We were talking earlier, and everyone was just like, "Dude, the farmers market scene, right?"
Dude, it's killer stuff.
Yeah.
So
It's a
option
good
number
one.
2
We like Busting.
is Busting. That's option number 2. Option number 3, I know, is a Marcus fave. So tell us a little bit about Marcus, what 1 fucking hour on Sweet Movie might be like.
I don't know. That's going to be tough to describe. Sweet Movie, Dusan Makiavek. That's how I say it anyway.
Close, I think.
It's one of his major works. I also did WR, Mysteries of the Organism. Very Eastern European, like pure art house feature film. Like it's in the Jodorowsky range.
Sure.
Maybe more, maybe even like less of a narrative thread though to guide you through.
I think so.
Also, there's some Pasolini, like just some hardcore, like offensive, like I can't believe this is in a movie type thing.
Lots of that. Yeah.
Yep.
Right now I'm blanking. One of my favorite French actors is in it. Pierre, what's his name? I can't remember his last name right now, but it's like this French sort of art house actor who made a bunch
Pierre
of
Clementi.
experimental films. Clementi.
Oh yeah.
He's a face for like the continental European art house films of the
Belle
early
de jour.
70s. And
Yeah.
he's in it. He's immersed in a tub of sugar for most of the film, I think. So
That's right.
There's a lot of that,
Yeah,
and a lot
there's
of
a
other
lot.
weird things happen in this sugar tub.
It'd be
There's also a
great to
chocolate tub.
There's
chocolate
chocolate
tub.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A lot of
There's,
tubs.
lots of nudity, lots of
There's a game show parody.
Yes.
It gets scatological at points.
Yeah.
It does.
Well, it has that troupe. It has the Auto Mules Material Action Crew, which is just they're the Gigi Allen of the art world, and I'm not exaggerating.
Before, yeah.
I'm not exaggerating at all. Actually,
No.
they do Gigi Allen art in the 60s and 70s, and they're prominently featured in this film.
Yeah.
and
great.
and also it has John Vernon, who was
Yeah.
from
Point Blank.
Point Blank and Animal House. you know?
Yeah.
And he winds up in there.
That's
and
crazy.
It's wild. It is a really special.
Oh, right.
really,
He's the
truly
principal.
wild film.
He's the principal
Yeah,
in
Animal House,
And,
yeah.
and he was
Animal House,
also in a film we
The
just did
Dean.
recently, right? Like
The
he was
Dean.
in a film.
Point Blank.
Point Blank.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
It's wild.
it's-
I love Sweet Movie. It's
it'd be
killer.
great.
Even
It
the
would take at
title's
least
cool.
an hour to figure out what it's about, So
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the
I'm
last
excited.
shot. Anyway, I digress. We
All
should probably
right.
just do it again. I'm gonna say this does not. It's not the death penalty for any of these titles.
No.
Like we're never going to return to any that lose. It's like we're fishing around with
Yeah.
movies that we're already kind of interested in, and
Yeah.
they might
Yeah, there we go.
pop up down the road.
All right. And the last, so that's option 3 is Sweet Movie. The last option is a fave of mine, a personal fave of mine. And I honestly think it's one of now this is a horror film, so totally different genre here that we're hitting you with. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies ever. I think that if there is a subgenre to horror that is, which I call sad horror, this would be the Citizen Kane maybe of sad horror. And that is the film Death Dream.
Death Dream, yeah.
AKA
So cool.
The Night Andy Came Home. Is that what it's also called?
Yeah.
And this is one of the first films to really kind of address the PTSD of the Vietnam War as well. It's kind of personified in this like zombie-like movie in a way, where basically one family, which is bizarrely enough played by John Marley and the other woman who starred in John Cassavetes' Faces.
I know.
Which makes
That's
no
so
sense.
weird. How did they wind up in this film? I know.
I don't know.
But they're there.
But the leading actors from
Gene
Cassavetes,
Carlin.
That's right. Gene Carlin and John Marley co-star from Cassavetes' Faces in this movie, Death Dream. They've been told that their son has been killed in action in Vietnam. But then, of course, a couple days later, or the next day, he comes home, but something's very different and very disturbing. And it is a very effective. It still packs a punch. It's got some really terrifying set pieces. Yeah. And it's really heavy.
Bob
really
Clark.
Heavy. Bob Clark. Baby
Bob Clark's
Geniuses.
just about his first big effort before Porky's and other stuff. He's an interesting director. He's good.
Yeah.
And it does star, as we all know, it's the only starring film of my high school girlfriend's father.
Yes, I know.
So weird.
So weird.
It's Richard Backus.
Yeah, Richard Backus.
Like, look him up. And
Oh.
Richard, sweet guy, great guy. Richard Backus made this, and then he just did soap operas.
Yeah, it's too bad because he's really
Yeah.
good in this.
I
He's
know.
really good in
I
this.
knew Richard.
And
That was
yeah.
crazy.
And Bob Clark is amazing. He also would do Black Christmas, which I also believe came out in 1974.
Yeah.
So,
5, I think maybe, but
yeah.
which that kind of is the first slasher to
Yeah.
credit him. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, Bob's great. No, duh. Hello, he did fucking A Christmas Story.
Yeah,
Bob
Christmas
Clark's
Story.
cool. Bob Clark's
Absolutely.
really interesting.
He's an interesting
Absolutely.
guy.
know?
Absolutely.
And he made them
So-
all in Canada too, right? It's like Canadian film.
Some of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Some of
yeah,
them,
he
I
is.
think,
He's-
yeah.
No, he is a Canadian filmmaker. Yeah, that's right.
He's very Canadian. Yes.
Yeah, he's very Canadian. So
They all feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your 4
Hey,
options.
those are interesting picks, guys.
Yep, you got
And it's in your hands.
one fucking hour on California Split, Busting, or Sweet Movie, or Death Dream. Those are your choices. Head over now to @1fucking hour on Instagram. Click on the stories. Vote right now, and the choice is yours. And while you're at it, you might as well sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/onefuckinghour. $5 a month. You can get our Blue Velvet commentary, which is coming out soon. We've also done Psycho 98, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want a feature-length commentary on Psycho 1998?
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
You can't say no to that.
No, it was torture to watch, but watch it with us, hang with us.
It was fun.
It's a fun time. And so you can either sign up on the Patreon or you can subscribe to the YouTube channel here. Both are the same benefits, same dollar amount. No matter what you do, you're going to get those perks. But anyway, thank you guys so much for hanging with us to talk Don't Look Now. And, of course, we can't let you go. Rémy,
thanks to our guest.
Yes,
thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rémy. Thank you so much for tagging in on this one. And, of course,
always a pleasure.
No, it's fun.
We'll see you at the next traumatic incident film.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Happy trails to you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. If there's grief, there's Rémy. Okay. And
Yes, trauma and grief.
Yeah, trauma and grief.
And little
all right.
creatures.
And little demon. That's right. If there's little demon creatures in like weird like raincoats or snowsuits, you'll be here too.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
So, all right, everybody. Well, have a good rest of your week. And of course, we can't leave you without your Momen of Zen. All right, everybody. Take care.
Never gets old. Bye.
We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
All these traits are distilled in the perfect microcosm of Roeg's work, the opening movement of his 1973 classic Don't Look Now.
Find me anyone who doesn't think the opening of Don't Look Now is up there with the finest work British cinema ever produced.
Take it easy.
No, but it is astonishing because very quietly you announce the premise of the film, and in a very brief sequence you effectively do the film. Child goes into water, child comes out of water, father overcoming, father has premonition. None of this is in the book. It's like 7 minutes in. It's like, there we go. That's the film, and now here's the film.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
That was wicked, man.